Welcome to a brand new episode of Radio with Pictures with FemLink Pacific and FemTalk 89 FM, in conversation with diverse rural women leaders, members of the LGBT network, and disability rights activists from across the country. I am Nandini Vandana, and thank you for tuning in. We've just concluded our second national consultation for 2018, and this week the focus has been on disability rights and what does it mean. Joining me in this episode, we have Fane Lomani, who is FemLink Pacific's convener correspondent for Thavua, Ba and Raki Raki district. Thank you, Fane, for being on the show. And also with us, we have Losana Deranalangi. She is the convener for the Nendi and Lotoka district. Thank you, Losana, for being here. And Andi Vasu, all the way from the Northern Division. She is based in Lambasa and also Executive Director for Transcend Oceania. Beginning with the segment, we will focus on what are some of the human security priorities when it comes to preparing for the cyclone season. And because you are liaising directly with rural women leaders in your various districts, what are some of the key points or key priorities that are coming up that we need to be able to address before the cyclone season? We'll begin with Andi Vasu.
Thank you, Nandini. For me, yes, we are talking about persons with disability and as well as a diverse group and in general people of our country. And for me, this is a need for us as leaders to better understand what really is the issue when it comes to disaster risk reduction or in preparedness. It is an issue of humanitarian and human security, and as well as listening to our women on the ground, especially with persons with disability. For me, I still ask that question that we really need to clarify what is the issue. And for me, the issue speaks out louder for us in this country as in terms of infrastructure and transportation. That's in looking at infrastructure. What other type of transport do we have in this country? What kind of public service it provides when it comes to roads? If we need transportation to be friendly, how can we work together with people working on the grounds on the road? Do we need to raise the footpath that it level with the entrance of the bus and transportation? These people need to be part of the conversation in building our country to better serve our communities. And prioritizing the focus of development. What really is a priority? This issue is not only an issue that we are just talking about now. We had been talking about it way back in 2000, building on to the past 10 years and 10 years plus. And some of the issues had never been addressed. There are still parts of the country in the north that the road has not even reached. And if roads are reaching there, it's the transportation that is the problem. And many parts are still traveling by boat. And then we talk about in the city, how is it accessible to persons of disability? We have women this week who are talking about having to go to another town to find transportation that she was allowed to even get on. So it's a question about the service that we provide as people of Fiji, and how can we improve that we serve each and every one.
Okay. Thank you, Andi Vasu. And Fane, just continuing with the conversation and focusing on disability rights. From the 3 districts that you represent, what are some of the key priorities for persons living with disability?
Thank you, Nandini. As you've heard from Andi Vasu, major priorities about infrastructure that's also faced in the Western Division. I think I'll focus mainly on mediana cities in terms of how accessible the information is and how women are getting this information and how they are communicating it. So it's not only about women with disabilities, but the women as well, the young women, the underserved communities. So in terms of preparedness, information is really important and how well they can prepare themselves. And also cross-cutting to the 7 pillars of human security, when we talk about preparedness and, of course, disaster risk reduction during and after any disasters.
Okay, thank you. And Losana, the two ladies have mentioned access to information. What particular information do we need pre-cyclone season?
Yes, information is very important, and also to know the mechanism, the disaster risk reduction mechanism, and how the information from them, relates right to the community level. Because the coordination between this committee from national, provincial, divisional, district, it has to be strengthened. Because the important thing first is information and how to get this information to the community. If they are coordinated well from the, let's say the community, they have the disaster risk committee. Okay, so they know their people, and that's another thing. Yeah, the importance of having disaggregated data, so that's how because it will define how they work in the community, especially when we have disability people in a community. It's not only their disabilities, it is a different impairment that they have. It will define how we are able to serve these people. And I think getting this information, coordinating well amongst all this map from the national right to the community, and they have these meetings, they will be able to define, to see where the gaps are. And pre-disaster and also post-disaster, when they come in to serve the people, it will depend on how they coordinate well with the committee in the community, and that is very important. Strengthen that coordination, because that is how they will trickle down the information to them. Because most of the time, the first thing is information. That's the first thing. You can't do anything without knowing what to do. And the weather updates, how it's being informed to these people. When they know the data, they know this one is got hearing impairment. That's how we'll define their work, right up to district level. They will know how to disseminate different kind of information to the different disabilities that we have in the community. It's important, I think, the coordination to work better, and also work very closely and have the disaggregated data.
Thank you. We will take a break now, and stay tuned, because in our next segment we then continue the conversation on disability rights and participation of women in decision-making processes. Welcome back, and we will continue the conversations when it comes to challenges that are faced by diverse women in accessing decision-making spaces in relation to disaster coordination. So we'll begin with you, Losana. What are some of the challenges faced, especially for persons living with disability, to access those spaces?
Yes, persons with disabilities and also women and young women as well. We are not able to be reflected in decision-making spaces, even though we have the National Gender Policy, which talks about equal participation, and also we have CEDAW Convention, which has already been ratified by Fiji, but still we see these gaps. And I think that is a big challenge. It's the realization of the policies. It's there, and it's not enough for provincial ROCOs to say to the Turanganikoro, in your committees, make sure, according to the policies, there should be equal representation. No, I think it's about time that we give numbers. Tell the Turanganikoro, in your all committees, if 10 in one disaster risk committee, make sure there's 3 there. Give the numbers. And when we talk about disaster risk reduction in this, at this time, it's important to understand that women, they are the first responders. They have to be in this committee. They have to be. And also, in terms of the Turangani Koro and advisory councillors, I'm just thinking about the challenges, how to realize these policies. And the Turangani Koro and advisory councillors, before we have the meeting, we say, okay, we start the meeting the way we always do. But at this point in time, they are the arms of government in the community. They are the ears and the eyes of the government. So what they should do is, they started to having their agendas. They have their agendas where they, after the formal opening, and then they have a space where women representative to talk, where women with disabilities and young women and youth. That's the way I think we can realize some of the policies which, which says that we have to have equal representation. Thank you, Nandini.
Thank you, Losana. And Fane, we acknowledge that women are first responders when it comes to humanitarian crisis, but often left out when it comes to decision-making spaces. What are the challenges that are faced, especially by women leaders from your district?
Thank you, Nandini. We've heard from Losana already, so I think it's cross-cutting in all the centers, less representation of women, not only women, but thinking of a diverse group as well, the LGBT network, the young women, they are not equally represented. They continue to push for the 50% representation. And in other ways, we need to recognize them, the lead role that they've been doing, such as women as being first responders. And we continue to recognize them and the work that they do. Then there's a need to include them, to be part of decision making, because they are more aware of the specific needs that is there for women living disabilities, the different disabilities that they have, and also the specific needs for women, lactating mothers or moms that are breastfeeding in terms of during any humanitarian assistance that comes after disaster. They are more aware of these needs, so they need to be there and to be included as well.
Thank you, Fane. Anivasu, I think the ladies have talked about the issues that that they're facing via the women leaders in their communities. Would you then say that there is a very important need to have 50-50 participation in decision-making structures?
Yes, I do agree with that. As women, I speak for myself as a mother of this country. Our focus prioritized on children. What is the best for our children? And to better build our future, we need to better serve our children. With mothers in participation in decision making, this will influence decision around that. For example, in the current situation in the country, there are changes happening. The question for me is, are these changes priority, or do we need to prioritize other changes? For example, the changes in prioritizing what could serve the disabilities better, what could serve the diverse group better. And changes are happening, for example, in the education system. We need quality education for our children. Is it about changing the head, the experienced teacher and putting in junior teachers? This is happening. But the question for us as mothers, at the end of the day, is the service provided a quality service?
Okay.
And that, I think, is a priority.
Okay, thank you. And just bringing back the conversation to disaster coordination and mobilizing, how do you think we can strengthen capacity of diverse women, particularly to be involved in disaster coordination processes?
I think the authorities will be better informed if these people are present in the room. These affected people, the persons with disability, the diverse group, the women, the minorities, they should be represented in the table of decision making to better influence. And also, my priority focus is on the service providers. Who are the actors that are going to make things happen? They need to know where when is the next step and how to do that.
Thank you, Andivasu. And Fane, you have mentioned awareness earlier on as well. What type of awareness are we looking at in order to strengthen capacity of rural women leaders?
Thank you, Nandini. I've mentioned that women are first responders, but awareness program has been not enough to come out to their community for them to be empowered in terms of disaster preparedness. It's been done in each communities and district, but at that level, at the district level, so most of them, when we talk to them or have this continuous monthly consultation, they continue to recommend for them more awareness in their communities. As for them, women to be educated first, so they are able to educate their community and also the district that they represent, because most of these women have been, the sources have been sharing the information through our Women's Weather Watch to their community. So in any disaster or any Women's Weather Watch update, they are the first recipient of these messages. They are making that connection to their village healthmen, to the advisory counselors. So in terms of them taking this lead role in disseminating information, I think more awareness is needed for them to empower their role and also the leadership role that they have been taking in their communities.
Thank you, and thank you for those discussions around participation of women. We will now take a break, and in the next segment we will continue conversations around what are key recommendations when it comes to safety, security and protection with dignity. Thank you and welcome back. In this final segment, we will be looking at what support is needed to ensure that safety, security and dignity is not compromised for diverse women in our communities, particularly for persons living with disability. And we'll start the conversation with Losana. And what are some of your key recommendations when it comes to that support needed?
I think as a woman leader in my community, it is important that we also have a disaster risk reduction plan in our own community, because we are accountable to our women, to our community, and when a disaster strikes, the government won't be there at that time. It is us who will be there, and we are accountable to our people. I think it's good that as a woman leader, we are all empowered as we come to this national consultation, and we should go back and know our community, know who lives there, because that will determine how we are able to cater for these women when disaster comes. And it's also good because then we know there are some houses in the community that can be used as evacuation centers at that point in time, where we can put the elderly, we can put the members of the LGBT and the disabilities. These are the things that we can do as a leader, as a woman leader, as a community leader, as a Turanganikoro. These are the simple things that we can all work together and do. Of course, the government will come in, but at that point in time, everybody have to take care of their own lives. And these simple things can minimize lots of damages later.
Thank you. And Fane, again, bringing the conversation to safety and security and ensuring how it is not compromised during disasters, what would be your key recommendations, particularly for persons living with disability and the LGBT network?
Thank you, Nandan. We've heard from the previous disaster the experiences of these events and continue to speaking to women living with disability, the LGBT network. They continue to address their recommendation in terms of accessing to evacuation centers to be disability friendly, accessible for the different disabilities that they have, and be more friendly for them. And also in terms of, I've shared earlier about media in our city. For people living with disabilities, they have different disabilities. For example, persons with hearing impairment, so it's hard for them to receive the news. So there are recommendations that it can be more accurate and more frequent for them, that can help them in their preparedness. So mostly their key recommendation around that area to be accurate and also a safe space for them to go to during disaster.
An important point that you bring out, which in the previous episodes of Radio with Pictures, we've heard from the women leaders that often when the evacuation center is viewed as the safe place, in reality it might not be the case. What are some of the narratives coming in from the districts?
Some of the experiences during this incident again is that with the LGBT network, they prefer not to go. It's more safe for them to stay in their own homes despite the situation that they go through. They are safe, they are not being discriminated. And women living with disability, they're finding it hard if the evacuation centers is a double building like the schools. They are not, it's not accessible for them to go to. So taking into consideration the experiences and the recommendation, I think it's something that we looking forward to. If there are evacuation centers that have been planned to be disability friendly and also accessible for them to come there and to be there for that period of time, and of course to be safe and secured, and also their safety have been protected, especially with young women. as there have been cases of violence that we've continued to hear from them. So those are some of the recommendations from them.
Okay, thank you, Fane. And Andivasu, what support do you think is needed, particularly in communities in the north when it comes to safety and security during disasters?
For me, bottom line is safety with dignity.
Yes.
It's not just being safe, being inside a shelter, but how is the person living in that shelter being protected in a dignified space, away from violence. And we talk about leaving no one behind. Cross on to from there, we also have conditions in terms of disbursing, for example, social welfare. We have conditions such as if people can feed themselves, they are not eligible. What about then we leave aside people with psychoservices needs? So it's about safety with dignity. And women are the first responders in disaster. And most especially women and children who are with persons with disability. They are more vulnerable during those times. If we are going to be sheltered in tents, for how long are we going to be in tents for? And without the convenience. So that is the dignified space that we prioritize. And in sharing the resources, how do we make sure that we are not really leaving anyone behind with the policies that we put in place? I think that should be the core focus, that it's not only human peace and security, it's also with safety and dignity.
Thank you, Andivasu. And just before we wrap up with this episode, what would be your Women's Weather Watch message pre the cyclone period 2018? We'll start with Losana.
Oh, I can just say a cyclone season is coming up, and just be prepared. Prepare your family first, and then look out for your community. Have a pack ready, maybe some water, first aid kit. Yeah, it's good to help ourselves first before others come and help us.
Thank you. Fane.
Thank you. Preparedness is not only during disasters such as cyclone and floods. For the Western Division, we're experiencing the long dry spell. So for them at this time, it's about food preservation and how they are saving up food for the experiences of the recent cyclone that we had. So main thing for their preparedness is about food, and also the storing of clean drinking water as we continue to face water cuts, and also dry spell, boreholes have been drying up. So those are the preparedness messages that we continue to do, and also from the women themselves.
Thank you. And Andivasu, with your message, I just wanted to, if you could share, when we say prepare, what do we mean when we say prepare for the cyclone season?
Prepare, for me, I mean that each and every one of us, we play a major role in that decision making and implementing the move. And most specifically, I speak to the service providers of this country and to the relevant authorities. That yes, the disabilities, the persons with disabilities, the diverse group are speaking up of their issue. They are not the one that will solve this issue, put in the infrastructure that's needed. It is those people, it is the authority of the day. If they could act now and not when disaster happened.
Okay.
That is my message.
Thank you, Andivasu. And that's our episode of Radio with Pictures for today. Thank you, Losana, Fane, and Andivasu again for joining us on this episode of the new season of Radio with Pictures. Don't forget, you can continue with the conversation and follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Femling Pacific. You can also follow us on Facebook, and of course by tuning into Femtalk 89 FM in Suva and Lambasa. Until the next time, thank you for your company, and bye for now.